Good evening, dear friends. Thank you for joining me this evening. We have a thunderstorm brewing here in Chicago, so we may have some unexpected sound effects. We'll wait and see. Right now it's raining. We shall see. The Apocalypse, the revelation to John. Last week we looked at the general picture of this last book of the Bible. We learned how John, the beloved disciple, had been brought to Rome, tried, attempts had been made to execute him, whether boiling in oil or beheading or hanging or stoning, we don't know exactly. It didn't work, and it seemed to the emperor and the court the best idea to ban him to this island of Patmos. This little island just off the coast of what is now Turkey. And actually, the Emperor Domitian could not have done Christianity a bigger favor than to send John to this island. The conditions were ideal for spiritual work. No distractions, no traveling, no ministering to any community, but simply being there. And I imagine living and reliving the pictures and the experiences of his life with Christ, of his deep, deep experiences of initiation and of going through death and resurrection with his Lord. And it is this Lord, this picture of one as a son of humanity, who appears to John, who calls him with a voice like a trumpet on the Lord's day, who appears with his head area brighter than the sun, in a long white garment bound together with a golden belt, the feet burnished, purified as in fire, and with a voice like many rushing waters. He instructs his faithful disciple, write what you see, what is to come, and send it to the 7 communities. And these 7 communities are represented by the 7 golden lampstands, among which this one as a son of man had moved, and the 7 stars which he holds in his right hand are the angels of the 7 communities. I'd like to say again a word about this word community. The Greek uses the word ecclesia, often translated church. I would like to use the word community because the actual translation is very complicated. It really means those who have been called out, so to speak, called out of their life up until now to set their foot upon a new path. Or, as Christians were called in the first centuries, people of the way. So when I use the word community, please always picture people who have been called, who have heard a voice, inwardly, perhaps outwardly, that have called them to leave behind who and what they were or thought they were, and were on the path to discover their true selves. So this one as a son of man instructs John to write to the 7 communities: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamum, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea. These 7, and there were probably many more, form a kind of a half circle in this western extremity of what is now Turkey. It would be fascinating, of course, to go through in detail each of the letters to the 7 communities. That would take several weeks. I'm going to look generally at the letters and then focus on the letter to the congregation to Sardis. Write to the angel of the community. This could be translated in various ways, understood in various ways. This angelos, it could be a messenger, it could be the priest, the bishop, the leader, the human leader of the community. It could also mean literally the angel of the community, proceeding from the assumption that each community of human beings attracts a spiritual being to it. This being connects itself with the community, with the individuals, and watches over it, protects it, inspires it, infuses the community with life, and creates a connection between that community and the spiritual world. As priests in the Christian community, we bear the task of being bearers of that consciousness, that there is a spiritual being connected to our community, or in my case, communities, or in my case as executive director for North America, always to imagine I'd like to think the archangel of the community in North America to be with us and to be working together with us, to be supporting us, infusing us with inspiration. These letters are directed to the angelos, to the angel of the community. Now, these communities were concrete, real groups of human beings, but also, as Rudolf Steiner points out again and again, represent various periods in the development of humanity, going back to several thousand years when India was the center of civilization, moving westward. In biblical times, the center of civilization would have been the Greek, Latin, Hebrew world. That center of civilization has moved westward and is now located, we might say, in Central Europe, Western Europe, and will continue to move about the globe, so that various parts of the earth are involved as center points of human development, spiritual development. Ephesus might be the very beginning, and in the far future, Laodicea. And we can think in these terms in any process that runs in 7 stages. You might, if you are in your 7th 7-year period of life, or past that, you might think back to the first one or the second one. Each of the letters begins with a greeting from the angel to the angel of the congregation in Ephesus, Smyrna, and so on. And each time one of the aspects of this being as a Son of Man is mentioned. You might say the Son of Humanity unfolds itself in the course of the 7 letters, much as the Son of Humanity unfolds himself in the year cycle of our liturgical celebrations. The Son of Man is a different being in Advent than in Epiphany, and reveals new qualities at Easter, again new qualities at St. John and Michaelmas, until we've gone around the entire year and experienced the Son of Man in each of these qualities. So the Son of Man writes to each of the congregations out of a particular aspect of himself. And then, like a good teacher, he praises each of the congregations for the things they have done, what they've accomplished, how they've been, how they've conducted themselves. And then comes each time a kind of, nowadays we would call it a criticism and evaluation. If any of you are working in the corporate world or the government world, you've undergone many evaluations, perhaps every 6 months or every year, where you look at yourself, your superior looks at you, your colleagues look at you. And now the Son of Man, with his all-encompassing vision, looks upon each of these 7 congregations and gives them things to work on, to think about. Now we have to remember that there was actually no such thing as Christianity. There was no Christian church. There was no structure. There was no skin. There were no best practices in those days. Not for no reason. These folks called themselves people of the way. They were on the path. They were becoming Christ-like. There were not yet rules or structures or traditions, practices that would tell you approximately how to behave as a Christian, or how to think, or how to look at the world. And so many of the people who have joined the followers of Christ on the way come from other practices. They might have been in the Hebrew world. They might have been followers of the Roman gods, the Greek gods, of other gods who've come from all over the world. And there in Asia Minor or in Turkey, many of these religions had settled, had found followers, practitioners, and some of these practitioners then had discovered Christ, had heard one of or more of his disciples speaking, became enthused when he heard this story of what apparently was a simple carpenter who wandered through Palestine and taught, healed, raised people from the dead, challenged the establishment, and then was killed. And on the third day arose as a new human being. That this story inspired countless human beings, hearing it directly from the mouths of the apostles who had witnessed these events, from those who had heard it directly from the apostles. And now we're moving into a kind of a third generation of people of the way who trust their own judgment, who believe their own ears and believe their own eyes, hear and see some of the followers of Christ and join them. A fire, we might say, awakens. Think of this fiery two-edged sword that was proceeding from the mouth of the Son of Humanity in the first chapter. That sword has touched many lives, and those lives turn regularly to the community of Christ, to the people of the way. They gather, they share food, they pray together, they serve each other, and sometimes things don't always go well in a community. Any of you who've lived in intentional community, or even the smallest community of a marriage or partnership, know that ideals sometimes, shall we say, get rusty or disappear under the weight of everyday life. This happens, of course, too, in communities. And the Son of Man is observing each of these communities and notices that not all the time ideals are being reached, perhaps not even remembered. And so he writes to the community in Sardis, "To the angel of the community in Sardis, write, these are the words of the one who has the 7 spirits of God and the 7 stars." He quotes, "I know your works. You have the name of being alive, and yet you are dead. Wake up and strengthen what remains and is on the point of death. For I have not found your works fulfilled in the sight of my God." That would be a rough thing to hear in a letter from the Son of Humanity, proclaimed to you by your angelos, by your bishop. You have the name of being alive, and yet you are dead. Well, you must not be completely dead, because he calls you to wake up, strengthen what remains, and is on the point of death. I have not found your works fulfilled in the sight of my God. The Son of Humanity sees the people in Sardis. He sees that they have received the word, that they have been filled with the power of the resurrection, that they have united themselves with the resurrected one. And yet, this consciousness threatens, time and time again, to disappear. We simply forget that we are committed to Christ. And Rudolf Steiner gave a very useful key when he said that the letter to Sardis characterizes the people of our age. You might say approximately since the Renaissance, stretching about 2,000 years from then. Those who are more familiar with anthroposophy will know that I'm speaking of what's called the age of the consciousness soul, or the fifth post-Atlantean period. And in this period, on the one hand, we're able to awaken and to open ourselves to higher consciousness. On the other hand, we have the task to completely unite with the material world. In a way, we're asked to do an impossible job. Dear friends, congratulations. Welcome to our age, in which we as spiritual beings, being on an earthly journey, are asked to commit ourselves to fully penetrate this world of material, at the same time to remember that we are intensely connected to the Spirit, to the guiding spirit of our personal life, our own angel, the angel of any religious community, spiritual community we belong to, the spiritual being who reigns over our country, over any larger connection that we're part of. There are so many spiritual beings looking out after us, and yet we have to do these things on our own. It's quite a task. And this letter to Sardis encompasses the impossibility of being alive in the world, being full of the powers of the resurrected ones, one, the seven spirits before the throne, the seven stars, and at the same time, to realize we are going to reach this point of death again and again. We are going to die into the material world again and again. Go work 8 hours a day in corporate America. I've done it. You die. You're dead. The physical forces take over. And yet, each day anew, we get up and we move with the Spirit of Christ into our world. The letter goes on. Remember then what you have received and heard. Keep that. Transform your minds and hearts. Again, practice. 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 It doesn't help to say, I'm a Christian. I follow Jesus. I love God. Those are wonderful things to say. I hope we affirm that regularly. And yet we have to practice. We have to sit down. We have to shut out the world. We have to concentrate on this being, the Son of Man, the angel of the community, the words of the gospel, the words of a meditation. There, we remember what we have received and heard. We keep that. We don't preserve it like jelly in the icebox. We move it in our soul. Remember how Mary moved the words of the Archangel Gabriel in her heart. The letter goes on. If you will not awaken, I will come as a thief. You will not know at what hour I will come upon you. And yet there is redemption possible. There are still a few in Sardis, people who have not defiled their garments. They shall walk with me in white, for they are worthy. Whoever overcomes shall be clad thus in white garments, and I will not blot out their names out of the book of life. Now these white garments, oh dear, that's something that has been royally misinterpreted over the years. Thinking, if I just keep my clothes clean, I don't get into trouble, I don't attract attention, I'll keep my clothes clean and everything will be all right. But you know, the people who keep their clothes clean, those are frequently the folks who actually do nothing. We might say those are the ones who have fallen asleep, who have actually forgotten what they heard, because they did not hear a pretty story about the risen one. They heard a story of suffering and aloneness and being deserted by your fellow human beings, of dying, and also of receiving new life and being able to give new life to fellow human beings. Resurrection. And so those who are worthy to walk in the white garments are not necessarily those who have kept themselves apart from the madding crowd, but actually those who have gone into the work, who have stepped into the rough places of life, who have taken up the challenge of their time, whether it be the biblical times or it be our own time. Those who actually take up their cross, their human cross, their own self, what has been given to them, whether it be loads of talents and a brilliant personality or something very calm and quiet that works in stillness. Those are the people who deserve the white garments. And the white garments are also, again, not outer material garments, dear friends. These are inner qualities. An inner garment that is still pure in the sense of remembering and practicing what the risen one taught and what Jesus of Nazareth taught and showed us. Pretty simple. Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and all of your mind and all of your soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. Simple, but not easy. Those are the instructions that will put us through changes, my dear friends. He speaks of overcoming. Now, those of us who lived through the 60s will never forget this wonderful song, "We Shall Overcome, We Shall Overcome." And this overcoming is not necessarily pushing aside the worldly powers and taking on political powers and authority. It has to do with overcoming this urgent desire to be completely connected with the material world, to lose oneself in the material world, the world of money, of sometimes of survival. Sometimes we have to give ourselves over to that world, but never, never are we far away from spending a few minutes each day with the resurrected one. Whoever has ears, hear what the Spirit says to the communities. With those words, the Son of Humanity ends each of his letters to the communities. Whoever has ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit says to the communities. And much will depend on what we are able to take in through our hearing, through our spiritually attuned hearing, and then transform into actions, however great or however small they may be. Our actions can be apocalyptic. They can be unveiling. They can show the presence of the resurrected one in our world. I wish you many blessings with hearing and doing the word. Have a pleasant evening, and I look forward to working together with you a week from now.